Yo, what's up everyone? Welcome to my channel, Greyhound DFS. Appreciate your viewership. I ask that if you get any value out of my video, please hit that like button. It helps me out a ton. Also, if you ain't yet, hit that subscribe button for me and hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified every time I upload a video. With that being said, let's get into it. I'm gonna start off. I'm gonna go position by position. Give you a couple picks that I like. So we'll start off with obviously we'll start off with I like to start off at the point guard position. Got James Harden. He's 11-8. They're playing Denver tomorrow. His last 3 games against Denver, he had a 59, a 58, and a 65. His usage rate continues to be high. It's 41% usage average. His last 3 games, his usage was 30, 54, and 38. Minutes, the last 3 games, 33, 38, and 40. You can see it went down a little when Russell Westbrook came back. So we'll see. 11-8, that's a lot. Denver also slow pace. Denver's slow. His last 3 games, fantasy points he's averaging 62 fantasy points per game. His last 3 games was 56, 66, and 71. I mean, you can't never go wrong with James Harden, dude. Like, ever. He's matchup proof pretty much. Next we got Luka Doncic. Can't go wrong with him either. He's playing Golden State. Golden State just came off a big win. I mean, it wasn't big, but they won by like 20, I think. They had 3 or 4 players score like 40 fantasy points. Pretty crazy. But anyway, Luka Doncic, he's playing Dallas. He's playing Golden State. His last 3 games against Golden State, he scored a 61, a 43, and a 35. His usage is still high, 35%. Last 3 game usage, 48, 35, 39. And sorry about that. That's my Twitter. Also, by the way, you can follow me on Twitter at Greyhound DFS. But back to Luka Doncic. He's averaging 60 fantasy points a game. His last 3 games, he's had a 77, a 58, and a 73. Can't go wrong with him against Golden State, that's for sure. Next, you got Trae Young here. Trae Young, his last 3 versus Milwaukee, he had a 0, so I'm guessing he didn't play that game. He had a 48 and a 45. His usage rate is 35%. He's averaging 34 minutes per game. He's scoring 48 fantasy points per game. His last 3 outings, he had 46, a 35, and a 45. Can't really go wrong there, but Eric Bledsoe's going to be guarding him. Eric Bledsoe's pretty tough. So, I don't know. You got Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook is 8,600. He's averaging 46 fantasy points per game. The last 3 games, he had a 67 and a 0, which he didn't play. He set off a rest, and then he had a 38. He's averaging 33 minutes a game, 32% usage rate. His last 3 games against Denver, he had a 55, a 52, and a 53. So, I mean, you probably can't go wrong with him and James Harden, honestly. But it's so slow, I wouldn't even, like, risk that at all. Not at all. Then we got Kyrie Irving is not playing, I don't think. So I ain't worried about him. Then you got Kemba Walker, who I rarely ever pick. He is averaging 40 fantasy points per game. His last 3 was 28, 31, and 39. Not spectacular for $8,200. Then he's averaging 33 minutes. He's averaging 28 usage rate. That's okay. He's averaging 43 fantasy points against the Clippers his last 3 games. He had a 60, a 29, and a 40. I imagine Patrick Beverly will be back, so you nip that in the bud. Then you got Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons is 8,000 on DraftKings. That's pretty much what I do with DraftKings. He's 8,000. Ben Simmons is. He's also small forward eligible. He's averaging 36 fantasy points per game. He's averaging 33 minutes, so that's a little over a point a minute. His usage rate is 20%. He's averaging 40 fantasy points against the Knicks. His last 3 games against the Knicks was a 35, a 62, and a 47. I don't know about him, though. Then you got Donovan Mitchell. He's averaging 41 fantasy points per game. His last 3 games, he had a 31, a 53, and a 42. He's averaging 35 minutes per game. So you're getting the minutes. He has a 31% usage rate. He's averaging 37 fantasy points against Minnesota. Dang, they're playing Minnesota again? His last 3 games against Minnesota was a 31, a 39, and 42. I don't think you can go wrong there either, just because Donovan Mitchell's a stud. Only for his price. He's a stud. Then you got, don't worry about none of them guys. Then you got Eric Bledsoe. He's 7,100. He's averaging 32 fantasy points per game. He's getting 27 minutes per game. His usage rate is 26%. He's averaging 38 fantasy points against Atlanta. Atlanta's probably going to get blown out, so I probably wouldn't pick anybody against them. I mean, not anybody. Yeah, like any player. I wouldn't do that, especially if they're a good team like Milwaukee. I wouldn't pick any player against Atlanta that plays on a good team. Then we got Zach LaVine, 6,800. He's averaging 35 fantasy points per game. His last 3 he had a 27, a 41, and a 47. He's averaging 32 minutes per game, so he's averaging over a point per minute. His usage rate is pretty high. It's not pretty high, but it's not the lowest. It's 30%. He's averaging 36 fantasy points per game against Detroit. His last 3 games, he had a 35, a 0, and a 37. I'm guessing that 0 was for rest. There's been a lot of that going on in the league, a lot of rest. I think all these illnesses have to do with faking an injury. Like, oh, he's sick, so he can just basically rest. And like all these back injuries too. There's been several back spasms. Like, come on, y'all are taking rests. Cause there's like a new rule in the league. You gotta, if it's a nationally televised game, you gotta clear it with the league first. So ways around it. But Zach LaVine is playing Detroit. They're at home, so I don't think you can go wrong there. That's pretty much all I like for real at point guard. I don't think I'll go down any further. If I do, we'll talk about them, I guess. I'm just move on to shooting guard here. See who I like here at shooting guard. Let me see here. Obviously, we just talked about James Harden and Luka Doncic already. Got Bradley Beal here. Let me see. Got Bradley Beal here for 9,500. He's playing the San Antonio Spurs. He's averaging 49 fantasy points per game. His last 3 games, he had a 57, a 68, and a 63. So you can tell it. You can see that he's been balling. He's averaging 36 minutes per game. His usage rate is 33%. So he's going to get the shots up, you know. He's averaging 44 fantasy points against San Antonio. His last 3 games against San Antonio, he's averaged 51. He scored a 51, a 35, and a 45. Not bad. Then we got DeMar DeRozan here. DeMar DeRozan is 8,100. He's averaging 36 fantasy points per game, which is It's not very good. His last 3 games, he scored 54, 33, and 32. He's averaging 34 minutes per game. His usage rate is 26%. He's averaging 34 fantasy points against Washington. Washington's defense is garbage, so I don't see why he couldn't score 40 fantasy points or 50, whatever, if he's just aggressive. But in that pop system, you can't really do what you want to do. You gotta just play your role, basically. He's averaging 34 fantasy points against Washington. His last 3 games, he's had a 41, a 27, and a 0. Probably for rest. So we already talked about Donovan Mitchell. Still talk about Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler, he's averaging 42 fantasy points per game. His last 3 games, he's had a 51, a 34, and a 49. He's averaging 34 minutes per game. His usage rate is 23%. He's playing against Cleveland, and Cleveland guards' defense is just trash. So I feel like I'm going to have to go with Jimmy Butler on this one because Cleveland is shit trucks. But I feel like it might be a blowout, so he might end up with like 35 and then sitting because they're beating the brakes off for Cleveland. So I don't know, it's a tough one to call. But his last 3 games against Cleveland, he scored a 34 and a 0 and a 30. Probably because they were blowouts. That might be all I like here. I think I like Kendrick Nunn. Where's he at? Luke Kennard ain't bad. There's Kendrick Nunn down here for $6,100. He's averaging 29 fantasy points per game. His last 3, he's had a 30, a 46, and a 35. Let's go ride the hot streak if you want. He's averaging 31 minutes a game. His last 3 games, he's had a 39, a 37, and a 36. He has a 25% usage rate. He's averaging 46 fantasy points against Cleveland. Last 3 against Cleveland was 46, a 0, and a 0. This ain't really his rookie year, but he been out of college for a year. He just didn't get drafted last year. I think he might have played in the G League and stuff, but he's a dog for sure. Yeah, that's all I like for shooting guard. Check out point guard. All the ones I'm reading to you are the top ones, like on Draft Dashboard. They're pretty much the top. I don't know however many I'm reading to you, 5, 6. So those are the ones I'd focus on for real. Let's go to small forward here. I would have had this up on my phone, but it was acting funny. Obviously, we got the Greek Freak here. The Greek Freak is 1102. Sorry about that. He's averaging 63 fantasy points per game. But like I said, he's playing against Atlanta, so they're probably going to beat the dog trash out of Atlanta. His last 3 games, he's averaging 55. Not averaging. He scored a 55, a 56, and a 72. He's averaging 33 minutes per game. His usage rate is 36%. It's up a little bit since Chris Middleton's out. I think Chris Middleton's going to be out for a few more weeks. He's averaging 54 fantasy points against Atlanta. His last 3 against Atlanta was a 54, a 0, and a 53. Nice. So maybe it won't blow. Let's go see what this score against Atlanta was. Well, they didn't play Atlanta this year, so I don't know. Then you got Kawhi Leonard. He's probably going to play, but he's questionable, so I doubt it. But anyway, he's averaging 52 fantasy points per game. He ain't played in 3 games. He's averaging 32 minutes per game. His usage rate is 37%. He's averaging 49 fantasy points against Boston. And in his last 3 against Boston, he scored a 37, a 50, and a 62. Can't never go wrong with Kawhi Leonard when he's going to play. When he's going to play and healthy. I think we already talked about DeMar DeRozan. Yeah, we did. We already talked about Ben Simmons. Let's talk about Paul George. Can't go wrong with Paul George at 7-8. But Boston's defense is pretty good. Boston's defense as a team is ranked 7th. And against the small forward position, they're ranked 8th. So they're not bad. So Paul George is averaging 44 fantasy points per game. His last 3 games, he's had a 31, a 54, and a 49. He's averaging 24 minutes per game. His usage rate is 41%. I imagine that comes down some when Kawhi Leonard comes back. So he's averaging 45 fantasy points against Boston. His last 3 against Boston, he scored a 54, a 35, and a 46. Can't go wrong with him, really. I mean, somebody's got to score the points for the Clippers. So, then you got Jimmy Butler. I think we talked about him too. Yeah, we talked about him playing against Cleveland. Let's see. Andrew Wiggins is out. You got Tobias Harris. So, draft dashboard skipping all of them and going to Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris will be playing the New York Knicks. He's averaging 36 fantasy points per game. His last 3 games, he's had a 47, a 33, and a 34. So he's pretty consistent around that 30 plus range. He's only 6,200. I mean, it's not bad. He's averaging 35 minutes a game. His usage rate is 22%. He's averaging 37 fantasy points per game against the New York Knicks. His last 3 games, he's had a 40, a 34, and a 38, which is not bad. Our next small forward, point guard, small forward, Draymond Green. That's crazy. Point small forward. He's averaging 28 fantasy points per game. Some of you that watch the games, you would know that he scored like a 44 tonight, I think. And they beat Memphis by like 20. But anyway, his last 3 games, he's had a 26, a 38, and a 22. And he's averaging 29 minutes a game. And his usage rate is at 16%. I don't know why it's so low. He's averaging 26 fantasy points per game against Dallas. His last 3 against Dallas was a 14, a 25, and a 39. Not too impressive. I won't be messing with you. Then you got Bojan Bogdanovic. He's at 5,800. He's averaging 29 fantasy points per game. His last 3 games, he's had a 29, a 22, and a 21. And he's averaging 32 minutes per game. His usage rate is 26%. He's averaging 36 fantasy points per game against Minnesota. His last 3 against Minnesota, he scored a 29, a 53, and a 26. Not bad at all. I think that's all who I want to get to. I'll tell you a couple more names. So, like, it's legit skipping over all of these people. Going down to Rudy Gay. Rudy Gay is playing against Washington. He's averaging 24 fantasy points per game. His last 3 games, he scored a 23, a 27, and a 21. He's averaging 22 minutes per game. His usage rate is 20%. It spiked a little bit last game to 24 for some reason. He's averaging 29 fantasy points per game against Washington. He's going to be getting guarded by Mo Wagner when he plays. I doubt that Thomas Bryant guards him. But just had to see how long I've been talking. I'm only on small forwards. I'll go ahead and skip him. Can't go wrong with Daniel House. Let's go on to power forwards. Let's go on to power forwards. Who do I like? We already talked about Giannis. So we're probably just going to skip and go to talk about Pascal Siakam. Let me see here. Sorry, I'm clicking on something on my laptop. Yeah, Pascal Siakam, he scored 36 points last game. Not bad, man. Not bad at all. So, Giannis and Kawhi Leonard are your top 2 power forwards. Then we got Pascal Siakam. Pascal Siakam is averaging 45 fantasy points per game. He's averaging 37 minutes. His last 3 games, he scored a 43, a 32, and a 52. His last 3 games, minutes-wise, was 34, 41, and 41. So he's getting the minutes. He has a 30% usage rate, which is pretty good. He's averaging 36 fantasy points per game against Orlando. I imagine he'll be getting guarded by, I don't think Vooch will guard him, but I imagine Jonathan Isaac or Aaron Gordon. I mean, they're pretty big guys. They're not the worst. His last 3 games against Orlando, he scored a 39, a 40, and a 29. I mean, that's not that bad. Then we talked about Paul George. LaMarcus Aldridge. He's averaging 34 fantasy points per game. His last 3 games, he's had a 32, a 55, and a 35. He's averaging 32 minutes per game. He's been in the mid-30s the last 3 games. He has a 23% usage rate. He's averaging 46 fantasy points per game against Washington. He's had his last 3 games, he scored a 46, a 38, and a 55. I like LaMarcus Aldridge in this matchup, for real. Then Kevin Love said he was going to play today. Tuesday. No, Wednesday, sorry. He said he was going to play Wednesday. So we'll see. Tristan Thompson's not playing, though. Kevin Love. He is averaging 40 fantasy points per game. His last 3 games, he's had a 0, 21, and 46. His last 3 games, for his minutes-wise, he's averaging 33 minutes per game. Last 3 games, minutes-wise, was a 0, 25, and a 38. His usage rate is 23%. He's averaging 39 fantasy points per game against Miami. He had a 46, a 33, and a 0 the last 3 games. Then we got Kristaps Porzingis. He's averaging 37 fantasy points per game. Last 3 games, he's had a 35, a 45, and a 44. He's playing against Golden State, so, dude, I might stack this and take him and Luka Doncic for real. He's averaging 32 minutes per game. His last 3 games per minute wise was 31, a 35, and a 33. So he's getting mid-30 on the minutes wise. His usage rate is 27, which is pretty dope. He has not played Golden State. His last 3 games against Golden State was 3 big old fat zeros. So, move on to Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin is averaging 34 fantasy points per game. He's only played in 2 or 3 games so far this season, so it's not much to go off of. But the 2 or 3 games that he has played, he's had a 37% usage rate, which is pretty badass. He's had his last 3 games, he's averaging 41 fantasy points against Chicago. His last 3 games against Chicago was a 0, 46, and a 35. I mean, who's really going to be guarding? Lauri Markkanen? Who else? Lauri Markkanen, Wendell Carter Jr. I mean, they're not very scary, to be truthful. Then we got Montrezl Harrell. He's not ranked after Blake. Yeah, Julius Randle's ranked after Blake. They're only 1 spot switch anyway. But Julius Randle, he is averaging 35 fantasy points per game. They're playing Philly, so he's not about to be able to bully ball at all. Not against, maybe against Tobias Harris, but not against Ben Simmons or Joel Embiid. So that's not gonna happen. But he's averaging 33 minutes per game. His usage rate is 25%. He's averaging 40 fantasy points against Philly. His last 3 games against Philly was a 50. He scored a 50, a 43, and a 29. So that's all the power forwards I'm going to go over. I like Eric Gordon, Thomas Bryant. Excuse me. I apologize for that. I'm just tired. Long day. It's not even late either. It's only 11:42 on Tuesday night. This is my first look at the Wednesday slate. Lakers just went to halftime. I think Caldwell Pope just threw LeBron alley-oop at the buzzer to go into OT to go to halftime at 61-51 Lakers. So we're gonna go to center, and this is telling me not to even take top 5 centers. And wouldn't you believe it, top 6 centers, and Joel Embiid is not even one of them. So we're gonna go to Karl Anthony Towns. Karl Anthony Towns, they're playing Utah, so he'll be getting guarded by Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert is the Stifle Tower. He's 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, back-to-back years. Like, just last year was his most recent, so he's won it the last 2 years. I mean, I'm pretty sure anyway. But Karl Anthony Towns, a.k.a. Cat, he's averaging 55 fantasy points per game. His last 3 games, he's had a 63, a 56, and a 55. He's averaging 33 minutes per game. His usage rate, he's averaging a 29% usage rate per game. He's averaging 53 fantasy points against Utah. His last 3 against Utah was a 63, a 51, and a 47. It's pretty damn good. I like him, but I like Vooch for sure. Nikola Vucevic, he is averaging 42 fantasy points per game. His last 3 games, he's had a 64, a 39, and a 45. He's averaging 32 minutes per game. His usage rate is 25%. He's only averaging 20 fantasy points per game against Toronto. I bet that's because Marc Gasol's big ass. Excuse my language. His last 3 against Toronto, he scored a 24, 16, and 21. So since Toronto is ranked like 3rd against his position, I'd stay away from him. We already talked about Pascal Siakam. He's ranked 3rd. Then we got Andre Drummond. So let me click on Andre Drummond. Andre Drummond is averaging 52 fantasy points per game. His last 3 games, he's scored a 44, a 33, and a 42. He's averaging 35 minutes per game. His usage rate is 26%. He's averaging 56 fantasy points against Chicago. His last 3 games against Chicago, he's had a 67, a 38, and a 64. Now, damn, that's just something that I can't ignore. But I don't think Blake been back, so I can't mess with this dude. I don't know. Yeah, I can't do it. He's not with Blake back. I don't think so. Then we got Nikola Jokic, the Joker. He's averaging 40 fantasy points per game. He's having a pretty rough season. His last 3 games, he's had a 27, a 38, and a 44. He's averaging 30 minutes per game. That's terrible. His usage rate is 25% average. It's going downhill. 3 games ago, it was 32. 2 games ago, it was 21. And then last game was only 15 usage rate. 15% usage rate. He's averaging 51 fantasy points against Houston. The last 3 games, he's had a 38, a 64, and a 50. I could see messing with him in this Houston game. Even though Denver's slow pace, I think I could still see myself picking him. Then we got Bam Adebayo. He's averaging 39 fantasy points per game. His last 3 games, he's had a 52, a 45, and a 38. He's averaging 32 minutes per game. His last 3 games, he's had a 34-minute game, a 39-minute game, and a 27-minute game. His usage rate is only 18%, so he's not gonna get his own shot really. He's averaging 33 fantasy points per game against Cleveland, and his last 3 against Cleveland was a 45, a 30, and a 23. Next up, we got Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert is averaging 37 fantasy points per game. His last 3 games, he scored a 40, a 56, and a 48. He's averaging 35 minutes per game. His usage rate is 15%. He's averaging 36 fantasy points per game against Minnesota. his last 3 against Minnesota was a 40, a 33, and a 37. I don't know if that was this year or not. It could have been. I'm not sure. Back to Clint Capella. Clint Capella, he's only 7,900. He's averaging 38 fantasy points per game. His last 3, he scored a 35. Oh, excuse me. And then he was on 2 games with a concussion, which you don't freaking heal 2 games off of a concussion. Like, come on, I've heard of athletes concussions lasting over a year. So 2 games, come on, man. His usage rate is only 16%. He's averaging 46 fantasy points per game against Denver. His last 3 against Denver was a 42 and a 0 and a 49. So we already talked about all these other guys. Thomas Bryant, don't even sweat him. But anyway, so okay, now we got all that out the way. We got all the information that we need. It's time to go ahead and pick I'm gonna give you 5 picks that I like. I'm gonna start with point guard. I'm going against Golden State. I hate to do it. I like Golden State, but I gotta do it. So I'm gonna go ahead and take Luka Doncic at 10-4. I'm gonna go to shooting guard. I'm gonna go get his pal Porzingis. I think. Can I get Porzingis at power forward? Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and take Porzingis at power forward against Golden State. Find me a shooting guard that I like, that I went over. Let me go back to shooting guard on here. Sorry. Let's see. DeMar DeRozan's 8,100. Donovan Mitchell's only 70-something hundred. You know what? I like Jimmy Butler against Cleveland. We'll find Jimmy Butler. Come here, buddy. Ooh, I need some value plays, don't I? Might not be able to get all these guys. So I have to go down here about some of the guys I didn't talk about. Maybe not. Maybe we can find value. It'd be up to you to find value then. Leave it up to you guys to find value. Will Barton, I mean, he might can get him up some shots. You know what? I'm going to get rid of Jimmy, find somebody cheaper. Can't go wrong with Fred VanVleet. Kyrie Irving might be out still. Kendrick Nunn. Bam. That's who I like. Same spot against Cleveland. So we'll see. Save some money. I like in this position. I guess I like Draymond Green. Why not? So now let me give you a center that I like. Vooch, nah. Joker. Ooh, but then that only leaves 3,900 for them guys. But it's the 5 I like. Hopefully you guys can find some value with injuries and stuff. I'm sure you guys can. But Houston, Denver. Houston, they get a lot of shots. This dude might can get him 10, 15 rebounds. I know Clint Capella gets a nice amount of rebounds. Let's go see how much he is. It's only 7,900. How much was Nikola Jokic? $400 difference, $500 difference. I think I might have to rock with Clint Capella, man, because the Joker been shitballing it. Even though he's averaging 40 fantasy points, that's pretty crazy. Clint Capella has had, look at his last few games. He's had 20 rebounds, 4 games straight, dude. Like, come on, man. That's Wilt Chamberlain numbers. This man is averaging 14 rebounds a game. Excuse me, he's averaging 13 rebounds a game. I think I'm going to have to roll with him. Boop. We'll roll with him. Well, that'll do it right there. That's my starting 5 lineup. You know, if you use it, let me know. I'll probably end up using it. But as I said in the beginning of the video, if you got any value out of this video, if you got any value out of my video, please hit the like button. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. I appreciate all you guys who made it through this video with me. It's a nice little journey we're on here playing DFS. But hit that notification bell so that you'll be notified every time I upload a video. I greatly appreciate it. Thanks for spending some time with me. Much love, Godspeed, and good luck with your picks. Peace out.